you all so much for being here at Santosha Yoga Australia's 10th birthday celebration. Today I want to share the story of where it all began, and I have to actually go back to about 2004, 2005. So I spent a year living in Banff in the Rocky Mountains, and I had, prior to that, been living in Elwood in Melbourne, so inner suburbs of Melbourne, in an apartment where I kind of knew my neighbours in the apartment block to say hello to, but beyond that, I never spoke to any neighbours. That was kind of what inner city living was like. And I moved to Banff and lived there for a year, and it was, it's a small town, and I immersed myself in the community. And that really sparked the desire that one day I wanted to live somewhere that was not a big city, that was smaller and quieter, scenically beautiful, and where community felt a little bit more close-knit. So that's where sort of the spark to move began. And then fast forward a few years where I met my partner Paul. And Paul and I had always talked about this desire to move somewhere more regional, more scenically beautiful. And we attended a festival in Melbourne that was called the Rural and Regional Living Festival. And there was a woman there who she had made a job out of helping people make tree changes. And she got you to write down, in terms of choosing a place to move to, what was important to you and what were your values. Unsurprisingly, Paul's and mine were completely different. My priorities were, this was before I was a teacher, so there had to be yoga available. I wanted to be able to practice yoga. It had to be surrounded by nature. And there had to be a community that I could immerse myself in. So, you do your research on some towns, and some places and even parts of Tassie can be very much, if you're not born here, you're not part of the community. And probably one of the most important things was, because I was leaving all my friends and family, the only people I knew in Tasmania were Paul's family, was I needed to be able to make friends. So they were my criteria. Anyway, life ticked on, and it must have been early 2013 where I was sort of saying to myself, I'm not living the life I want to be living. I don't want to be living in Melbourne and on the rat race, the treadmill, busy, busy, busy all the time. And I remember saying to myself, well, Danielle, what are you doing about it? So I thought, right, what can I do about this? One of the obstacles was always, well, what am I going to do for a living? I'd always worked for large multinational companies, and I'm like, if I go to a small place, where am I going to get a job? And I thought, well, I know, I like doing yoga. I'll do my yoga teacher training. And that's something that I can do, as a short-term transitional thing. It'll be a job that'll pay me some income while I look for another job. So that was the intention. It was going to be a bit of a stopgap. And in fact, because I grew up, my father ran his own business, I had always said, oh, I never want to run my own business. What a stress. Like, I just want to work for the man, because you get paid and no matter what goes down, you're going to get paid. You don't want to lose your house over, etc. So I had sworn I was never going to run my own business. In that same year, I got breast cancer. And I was diagnosed, I think it was 2 weeks after finishing my yoga teacher training. And if I had not had yoga, I don't know how I would have got through that period. But I mention this because a lot of people I know assume that my life change was driven by cancer, but as I'm explaining, it was set very much before this. But certainly having cancer did definitely hasten the path, because it's like, life's too short to not be living the life that you want to live. So 2014, Christmas, New Year, we come down to Tasmania to visit Paul's family, and I remember standing at his parents' place in Sandy Bay looking at the view and said, would you ever come back? Because he'd always sort of not been keen on that. And he went, maybe. And I went, Right, maybe. Right, you've never said that before. Okay, let's make a plan. It was Paul who did the research. It was Paul who said, I want to move to Kettering. I said, where the hell's Kettering? We came down in 2015 and looked at a couple of properties. And I remember driving into the driveway where, those of you who've been to the Yoga Shack know, you come over and you come down and you see the shed. And I saw that shed and I went, oh, that would make a good yoga studio. And at this stage I'd been teaching yoga for 2 years on the side of my job, but that was kind of the dream that one day I could come down to yoga, come down to Tassie, live here and teach yoga and run yoga retreats. So after we had purchased that property, we thought, oh, it'll take a few years to move down, but I went on a retreat and got crystal clear clarity that no, I wanted to be living in Tassie, teaching yoga, and I wanted that to be sooner than later. And I think it was only a few weeks later than that I got offered a redundancy. I was just like, I'm not particularly spiritual, but thank you, universe, for providing that. So in the first quarter of 2016, I spent all that time researching, planning and creating Santosha Yoga Australia. I had come down to Tassie and I looked for a place where I could hold classes and found the Diamond Dance Studio. So many of you will remember the Diamond Dance Studio where we started. And ironically, the Diamond Dance Studio are teaching their classes in the hallway today. I packed up and moved in March with our two cats, Aardvark and Zebu, and Paul stayed behind in Melbourne for what he said was going to be just a little bit longer. I thought that would mean 6 months, it meant 2 years, but he eventually came down full time. And the first class at Diamond Dance Studio was held on April 19, 2016. Most people in the first week were my in-laws and their friends. The first week was free, so it was pretty popular in the first week. And then, over those 10 years, it's really grown as a community, and so many of you have been practicing with me for absolute years, and I have been told that most people only practice yoga for a couple of years before they drop out. So for those of you that have been practicing for many years, it's a testament to you for maintaining that practice. As I said, yoga was meant to be a stopgap, a transition, and I just did not expect to love it as much as I did. Teaching yoga is, it's a responsibility. I carry a lot of responsibility. For example, I know whose knees can't flex in child's pose and need an alternative. I know who's limited in external rotation of the hips and what to offer them instead. It's a position of privilege as well, because there have been a number of times where I'm the first to know of somebody becoming pregnant, beyond their partner of course. I'm often the first to know of serious illness. Obviously the physical nature of yoga means that people need to tell their yoga teacher these things, but beyond that, I've shared in your life journey and changes and transitions, whether that's relationship breakdowns, job changes, mental health challenges. The position of a yoga teacher is really one that's very, very privileged and that I honour. And I've got to say that I learn as much from my students as you learn from me, so I thank you all for that. So the community, people have come and gone, and it was really interesting putting that photo board together. There are some faces in there that I don't recall who they are, and then there are faces in there that are still here and in this room. So some people have gone from being a student to being a teacher themselves and even teaching classes for me. We've had births in our community. Sadly, we've had deaths as well. We've shared lots of laughter and tears and maybe a little bit of sweat. And one of the most important things is, if I come back to my criteria for what I wanted this treat change to look like, was finding friends, and yoga has been the source of finding some very valuable friends. So I started with a mission to help people seek contentment in the present, contentment with what they have. That's the meaning of Santosha. It's a Sanskrit word for contentment. And I absolutely feel that. But what I feel today is it goes even beyond that. It's gratitude, it's pride, it's privilege, and most of all, it's love. Thank you. All right, I want to make some special mentions. So, the very first class in Kingston, the Diamond Dance Studio, most of those people, I have no idea who they are. When I looked at them, well, I know who they are, but they've been and gone. There was one person who was in that very first class who's still practicing with me today. That is my friend Claire. And there's a few others who started in the first month of Santosha who are still practicing with me today, including Julie, Pam, who's not here, but you all know Pam from Tuesday night, and Natalia Yurasevic. Natalia, you're here in the first month as well. By June 2016, I had started classes at West Winds at Heather Goliath's suggestion. And there are 4 people in that first class at West Winds that still practice with me today, including Mary, Dee, who's not here today, but she sent her love. Sue, where is Sue Thane? Sue, you were in that first class. And another dear friend of mine, Sarah Schwartz, was also in that first class and still practices with me. Other people who joined in the first 6 months, so you should know some of these names. So Janie from Tuesday night class, Zoe Magnus from Monday, Heather Goliath, Karen, Bronwyn from Tuesday morning, Jill, you were in the first 6 months. Liz Carter, where's Liz? There you are. Natalia Atkins, who started in the first 6 months. Marie Rose, who isn't here today, very sad about that. Susan and Jan. Where's Jan gone? Yes, you. Jan Banks. And then there were many more who joined in later in that year who are still practicing with me today. So, my final notes are, I have a couple of special mentions that I have a gift for. So when I think back to that first year, and as I said, the first week was very popular because it was new and it was free. And then ever since then, it's been an absolute roller coaster of class numbers. But particularly in that first year, there are 4 people that without Santosha wouldn't be here still today. So Penny and Sarah. The number of times it was just you 2 in the Vinyasa class. And Liz and Marie, you were, if it wasn't for you guys showing up, particularly for Yin, when I was trying to get Yin off the ground, there was many times it was just the 2 of you. Without the 4 of you, I would have given up. I think Zoe wrote to me and said, I can remember back at West Winds when you were contemplating, should I go back to my day job? I've contemplated that many times, to be honest, but here I am, still doing it, and the 4 of you couldn't have done it without you, so I have a little gift for each of you. 2 last things. I want to thank my parents for raising me to believe that I can do anything that I want to do and support me in all of my choices. And I can't go without mentioning, I'll keep this very brief because it doesn't like attention, but honestly the bedrock of Santosha is Paul. Not just for the many hours of unpaid work he's done as my parking attendant. He often talks about how much he should be charging me, but it's all done out of love. But I'll just suffice to say Santosha would not still be here if it wasn't for the support of Paul. And now I want to announce, and with a big thank you, that how much we have raised today. So we've raised a total of $392 for donations today. And it was neck and neck between two charities that you all voted for. And by a nose, by a whisker, Bonorong came out as the #1 charity. But it was always my intention to match this donation. So I've decided that I will match it and give the other half to Hobart City Mission. Definitely a worthy charity given the climate that we live in today. So thank you all so much for your donations. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of Santosha for as many years as you have been. And please eat all the food because I'm going out for lunch. I don't want to take it home. Thanks so much.